Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. First order of business this evening is to approve the order of the agenda. For everybody's information, item number 1 on the regular agenda has been pulled for this evening. The people from MATBUS wanted to be a little more prepared, so that will be at a future meeting. So it's removed from the regular agenda. Item number 1.
I move we approve with the amendment.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Jurdevig. Been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Approval of the minutes from February 4th, 2019. They have been distributed on pages 2 through 4.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Thorstead. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of February 14th as distributed. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is building permits. Item D. They have been distributed for your review.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson. It's been moved and seconded to approve the building permits report as distributed. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is the consent agenda to approve the following. As distributed in our packets, the monthly distribution of bills on pages 5 through 9, a gaming site authorization for the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, MNDAC Inc., at the West Fargo Conference Center, games of chance for the Fargo Invaders Football Club at the Bordertown Bar and Grill, and games of chance for Ducks Unlimited at the Speedway Event Center. And also, item E is a scheduled first reading and public hearing at 5:30 on March 4th, 2019. It's just a notification that the public hearing will be March 4th for zoning ordinance amendments to sections 4-442 and 4-447 on pages 15 and 16. What is your pleasure, Commissioners?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Thorstead. It's been moved and seconded to accept the consent agenda as presented. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on. For the regular agenda, item 1 has been struck as I previously stated. Item number 2 is review the supplementary engineer's report for the Street Improvement District number 2250. Mr. Scott.
Good evening, and thank you, Your Honor, and members of the Commission. Give me a second here while I switch over. If I can. Okay, and thanks again. So what we have tonight is a continuation of a project associated with 2250, which is the Sheyenne Street Reconstruction Improvement District. I'm going to start with the, just a little recap of District 2250. The assessment boundary includes all of the property on the south side of the interstate. So as I'm bringing it up here, as you can see, everything south of the interstate is within this assessment boundary and includes 3 segments of work. Segment 2 is what was under construction last year, and that is from Beaton Drive down to 32nd Avenue. Segment 3 is what the DOT let out bids in November, which we awarded a contract to Dakota Underground. That'll get started in 2019 here. And there is a third, much smaller component, which is what we're presenting tonight. What I'm presenting tonight is work to be done on Kensington Drive. What was provided in your packet was a synopsis or a report that explains the nature of these improvements and why we have to do them independently of the major segments 2 and 3. For the brief summary version of that, the report goes along, gets right to a point where it identifies the fact that when we were finalizing the environmental document phase with segment 3, the scope of work with Kensington Drive was not included in the original environmental document, so we had to disassociate it from the segment 3 project so that the DOT could move forward on schedule and open bids. So what we planned to do was then continue to develop the Kensington Drive improvement at a future date, which we're at a point now where we've finalized the design. But predominantly why we had to separate this is because the DOT would have had to reopen the environmental document and start that process over. So again, to save on time, we just pulled this small segment of work out and are proceeding with its own construction contract. The nature of the improvement kind of stems to the design of Sheyenne Street, which is kind of hard to see it, but today Kensington Drive has a full access onto Sheyenne Street. The improvements, after they're constructed, include a median here, which will limit the access that they currently have. So they will no longer be able to take a left in or take a left out. So being that we are going to be changing their access, we decided to engage the neighborhood on alternatives. We had a couple different meetings with this neighborhood. I believe Chris was the one engaged with them directly, where we asked them, what would you like as an alternative in terms of modifying the access? The consensus of the neighborhood was to build a driveway. Today, it's hard to see on this map, but they have a cul-de-sac that dead ends, which historically they've liked that concept because it cut down on through traffic. People intentionally leaving Sheyenne Street, cutting through their neighborhood to maybe get up to Hidden Circle up here. So the nature of the improvement now is to, unfortunately, we have to go away from their cul-de-sac, open that back up, make a connection to Hidden Circle so that now they have ability to access the full intersection here at 38th. This particular map shows the construction plans, if you will, of what this will look like. So basically a couple hundred feet of asphalt paving. It also comes with a little bit of stormwater drains that we got to install, so on and so forth, that will complete a connection from Kensington Drive to Hidden Circle. The engineer has estimated the construction of this will be about $145,000. So again, it's a relatively small portion of the overall Sheyenne Street project. The original engineer's report for Sheyenne Street, I think, was a total project cost of $39 million. So this is really not impacting that very much. But like I said at the beginning, this was originally anticipated in the engineer's report. It's just we ended up taking it out of the construction plans for segment 3 and are bidding it as a separate project. So, what I am looking for tonight is the approval of the plans and specs, and then authorization to advertise the bid opening. And with that, I will answer any questions.
Will the $145,000 be rolled into the $39,000 when it comes out for special assessments, or will it be a very small separate $145,000 assessment, or would that be paid by sales tax?
So at this point, it hasn't been broken out as its own individual assessment to these areas. It is a part of the overall $39 million project, which after federal funding, I think at this point we're at a $24 million assessment to this entire district. It has not been separated out. It is something that is kind of a benefit of the whole project. We had to do this to get the final design done. So where I'm going with this is that there hasn't been a decision made as far as will this be picked up 100% locally, or will it be a part of the overall assessment. With that, I'd like to have more of that conversation to start with the assessment commission.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Any other questions, Mr. Scott?
Just one.
Commissioner Olson?
Where the cul-de-sac is right now, that extra asphalt is going to be removed, right? So we won't see any remnants of that?
That is correct. Okay. Yep. It'll look like a typical roadway section.
What has been the feedback from those residents in that cul-de-sac with regard to opening it up?
With that, I'd probably defer that one to Chris, since he's been meeting with them.
Sprungard.
Back in, Mayor and Commissioners, back in the spring of 18, we had a meeting and was attended by at least one member of every household in that neighborhood. And we discussed several different options of how to handle these things, because we know going into it, with the median being down in the middle of Sheyenne Street, they would no longer have full access. So we started off with a right in, right out at that location and opening up this back driveway. We had several different sub-alternatives. They voted unanimously to actually make that as a right out only on Sheyenne Street. So if you're northbound on Sheyenne, you cannot take a right into it. And they also voted to have a full access off of Hidden Circle. So I think that was well received by the neighborhood. And then just several weeks ago, we had another meeting with this neighborhood. They brought up no issues with the proposed road construction. We had an opportunity to stub in water and sewer into this neighborhood, and we thought it was up to them. That would be actually a local cost to them for a burden. And they decided not to go forward either the water or sewer. We want to give them that option, knowing that's cheaper now, but it's a cost they have to bear, and they may not need it for 1 year or 20. So they elected not to go that way.
Unlike the driveway component, the sewer and water that we would have extended would have been 100% assessed to each resident out there.
Kirsten?
On 38th Avenue, will that have a signal light, or is it possible to put a signal light there at some point?
It will be a signalized intersection.
It will, okay, because we're funneling a lot of that traffic to that point.
During our last construction out there, I believe was it 40th Avenue? We actually had that as a signalized intersection. It worked pretty nicely.
Could we go back to Sheyenne Street when you decided the right turns and left turns and the divider? Mm-hmm. Is that by directive of the DOT, North Dakota DOT, or was that by our recommendation from our engineering?
It was a design criteria of the access spacing and the overall operation of the roadway. So it's such close proximity to 38th that would start getting the functional area of the intersection.
By the North Dakota DOT or by our engineering team?
By the DOT.
So, Chris, to be clear, the neighborhood is in support of this? Is that what I'm hearing you tell me?
Yep, this is the option that they selected unanimously. Okay. Correct.
Unanimously?
Unanimously.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Any additional questions?
I will add that in the report that you have in your packet, there is a section called public involvement. Just gives a synopsis on the meetings that we did have, or that Chris had.
And for the record, I read all of that, but I wanted you to state it in the public forum.
Absolutely.
Anyone else?
Just a comment, at what point are we gonna decide how we're gonna pay for it? Cause that's obviously gonna be on the minds of those people that are adjacent to this, cause if it's gonna be 4 or 5 houses, they're gonna explode. If it's over a large area because it's being necessitated by the Sheyenne Street project, that's probably more palatable.
It's a good question. So this gets into the realm of assigning the benefit of a project, which, as we've talked about during our special assessment forums, is set by the Special Assessment Commission. We typically don't have a regular scheduled meeting with that body, but we can certainly look to scheduling a special meeting, and maybe there's a couple other unique items that would be nice to bring to their forefront sooner than later. You know, generally we'll start meeting with them when we're ready to bond. This is certainly one of these unique items. I think that we should certainly have a special meeting with them, and maybe just plan to have a report back to the City Commission, you know, either at the next meeting or a couple meetings from now, so that everyone is aware.
Well, we want the Special Assessment Committee to function independently, obviously, but if you would please share our comments with them about our concerns for that particular neighborhood that was driven by engineering criteria, we'd appreciate that, Mr. Scott.
I do have one more question, Dustin. So, when you say local, in my mind, I'm assuming Windsor Green neighborhood, but would some of these costs go over to Hidden Circle as well?
Well,
depending upon what the committee says, I would assume you're going to tell me, right? Have you met with any of the people in Hidden Circle about this?
No. The meeting was limited to the neighborhood, specifically, or the residents specifically along Kensington Drive, unless, Chris, did anybody show up that you're aware of from Hidden Circle? I don't think we intentionally reached out to them, so yes, you're 100% right. If the assessment committee decided, hey, let's spread it to, throughout just the Windsor Green neighborhood, which is, of course, Hidden Circle, Kensington Drive, so on and so forth, yeah, that would certainly come as a surprise to them. At this point,
that's what we're trying to avoid, is those surprises.
Absolutely.
So I don't know how you would expect us to approve the engineer report and approve all this tonight when you haven't talked to anybody in Hidden Circle yet. That's what concerns me. Then we're going to be right back to 4060 again.
Commissioner Simmons, as part of this whole project, my recommendation would be actually have this as overall project cost as part of the Sheyenne Street. It's directly related to the mitigation of the impacts of this neighborhood experiencing because of the Sheyenne Street project. If we weren't constructing this segment, they would still have their full access, so they're actually putting at a disadvantage as of this access being basically limited without
I agree
their
with
ability.
That.
So I think it should be shared as part of the overall project cost.
But I think we have to let everybody know that, that's all. But I do agree with that, because we're actually taking something away from them here too, a very accessible access, and we're giving them more or less a back route. So I do exactly agree with what you're saying, but I do think that we need to let them know, Hidden Circle, what's going on.
This was part of Project 2250, right?
Correct, yep, and the pending assessments that are published on our website are calculated with that particular basis, that this work with Kensington Drive would have been included with segment 3 had we been able to move forward, and as Chris said, is a part of mitigating the access deficiency that they are now going to experience. So the way the preliminary assessments were calculated was that this $150,000 is an overall project cost, that overall $25 million of assessment.
Just segmented out just so you could get things going faster on the main part
on the
of
main
Cheyenne.
project, correct.
So I would assume it'd be all part of 2250 when we assess it, based on that alone.
Okay.
Gentlemen, if the Special Assessment Commission does not feel, as you do, that it should be assessed on the overall project, the Commission would appreciate notification on that right away, because I would engage our communications department or whomever to engage with those other people to make them aware of it prior to it being assessed. If you would, please.
Yep, that makes sense.
Thank you. So as reviewing this, are you looking for an action item this evening, Mr. Scott?
Yeah, so the action item would be to approve the plans and then authorize us to advertise for a bid opening.
All right. Gentlemen, are there any more questions of Mr. Scott? Scott, what's your pleasure?
Move we approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic moved and seconded to approve the supplementary engineer's report for Street Improvement District number 2250. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Regular agenda item number 3, review the conditional use permit for expansion of the West Fargo Airport facilities. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tonight we are looking at an application that we received in order to continue developing hangars at the West Fargo Airport. The airport is currently zoned A for agricultural. Lack of proper zoning to accommodate a municipal airport has left it zoned Ag. The Ag district specifically allows for this as a conditionally permitted use. However, our existing conditional use permit has specific locations and a number of hangars in an approved site plan that we approved back in, I believe, last one was 2002. The airport has provided an updated site plan. It's included in your packet, and they're continuing to work on an airport layout plan with the North Dakota Aeronautics Commission. However, for the purposes of additional development of hangars, without specific location or numbers, the city here is proposing just to amend our conditional use permit to allow them to continue to develop hangars on their existing site. Staff notes with the airport layout plan that the city's relationship should continue, and that area plan is developed north of town to prevent incompatibility and develop shared goals and visions for growth. Rather than looking into that major part, which we should look into in the future, we didn't feel it necessary to hold up their conditional use permit to allow them to continue to build hangars. So that's why staff, along with the airport authority, is asking tonight for consideration of the conditional use permit to allow additional hangars without stating exactly how many it's going to be, just allowing that area that they already own to provide extra hangars. With regard to criteria for granting conditional use permits, staff notes no areas of concern. Property owners within 350 feet were notified and no comments have been received to date. At their February 12th meeting, the Planning Commission held a public hearing and reviewed the application and are hereby forwarding the recommendation for approval. There is no public hearing scheduled. However, Robbie Grandy, from the manager of the Airport Authority, is available for any questions you might have, as well as am I.
Thank you, Mr. Solberg. Mr. Jurdovic.
So I have I guess a thought I'll share first, and then that'll get me to a question. You know, I struggle a little bit with the airport when I look at our city budget. You know, every property taxpayer in the city of West Fargo is paying for an airport that 99+% of them have never and probably will never use. I struggle with that. To me, property tax should be used to fund things that the majority of people are using and that make it, you know, provide a competitive advantage to our city. That said, that's maybe a topic for a different day. The question I have that which is in my mind, though, is expanding the airport and building more hangars going to lessen the burden to our property taxpayers by making the airport run more profitably and therefore less tax dollars being devoted to it? Or is it going to do the opposite? So to me, I'd like to see some pro forma financial statements that kind of make some prediction around potential expansion of, if they build 3 or 4 more hangars out there financially, is that making a bigger tax burden to the city? Because I question that already.
Kind of a loaded question for this
It's a big topic, yeah. I agree.
So the conditional use permit speaks to use specifically, and so is the use an issue, and our process for that is quite a bit different than the consideration you're having. I don't even know if I should probably let the applicant or the airport manager talk to that a little bit, or it's probably more for Tina actually than him, but I'll give him an opportunity to speak to that. The only thing I'll just say is use is considered. Maybe that discussion could hold up our decision tonight on use by just hey, we want to back up because this is a city-owned entity, so let's hold off on that?
To me, where it's important is, before we,
Yeah.
approve something that can lead to more hangars being built out there, is to understand how that financially impacts our property tax to our residents of the city.
Do you have any?
Good evening. Would you please state your name and your address, please?
Robbie Grandy, 4853 38th Avenue North in Riley's Acres.
Thank you, sir.
To address your question, Commissioner Gertwig, we're looking to expand just on existing ground we already own, to create more airplane, or it's going to bring in more airplanes and more traffic to our airport. As far as what exactly that's going to do to the tax-based numbers, I don't have a direct answer off the top of my head. I can't see it being a huge impact.
Yeah, I think it's important, though, that before we just go in and, build out more tarmac or whatever the proper term is to park an airplane on,
Sure.
that we do understand the numbers. Before we, approve something where we can build 3, 4, 5 more hangars and more investment in facilities, we should have an idea of what those estimates are and the financial impact, in my opinion.
I have a quick question, Robbie. Do you guys pay property tax?
No.
You do not pay property? Tina, I should probably ask. The buildings.
We do.
So you do on the buildings,
yes,
right? That's what I thought. So then if you put up 2 or 3 more buildings, obviously the property value is going to go up, which means you are going to pay more taxes to the city, the property values. So to answer part of that question.
But is that greater than the investment we would make in the tarmac and other facilities that the city owns? I guess is my concern.
I was just going with the one.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
It will bring more value.
It is a very good point.
Yeah, I don't know about the rest, Commissioner.
And that's, that just brings me back to before I would vote to approve anything that expanded upon the facility of the airport, I would like to understand the financial impact of that expansion.
I can speak just for a moment. I believe, and Mr. Grandy could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they have a little bit of time. Maybe a good thing would be to step back and hold any decision tonight, because they're not building the hangar tomorrow. Give us a couple weeks, maybe a month even, to try to look at some of that. And I know Commissioner Simmons has been sitting on the board, but not for too long, maybe 6 months or so. I don't remember.
Right. Yep.
So maybe we could talk with Commissioner Simmons and try to, understand some of the implications of that before we come. Because I was looking at it strictly from a use, not about a greater. And our West Fargo 2.0 really kind of includes the airport within its growth discussion, but we never really talked about what that costs. So I could work with Commissioner Simmons.
Sure, we could set up a meeting, Robbie, and have a meeting with Commissioner Gertwig. I do have a question, because is there a timeline on this, though, or is there not really? Are we okay with waiting a couple of weeks and setting up a meeting? And
no, that's perfectly fine.
Would that work out? Okay.
There's one person who wanted to build a hangar, and and he's not going to build it right now. So
he actually wants to build 2, doesn't he?
He already, and the first one fits in the existing conditional use. It would be the second one.
It would be the second one. So
yes.
Yeah. Okay. I guess if you want to, I'll make a motion to table this issue. Should we do that for now? Make a motion to table this issue.
Go one of 2 ways: up or vote in favor of it, and then we know what it is, or you can table it. Yes.
Well, I guess what would we're in no hurry, right? Are we okay with that? I'm asking you right out now if we need to,
Nope.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to table this then for 2 weeks, I guess. Till the
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to table the supplementary engineer's report for item number 3. Review the conditional use permit for expansion of West Fargo airport facilities as presented. Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Sober. Thank you, sir. Next order of business, number 4, review the conditional use permit for laser tag facility in light industrial zoning district at 1702 4th Avenue Northwest. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. We received this application in order to provide for a laser tag facility as a conditional use within the light industrial zoning district. This action is intended to protect the heavier uses within this district, recognizing that the lighter commercial use is out of place. This is similar in fashion, kind of opposite in intensity to how we might consider a home occupation in a residential district. In this instance, staff has not noted any concern regarding criteria for granting a conditional use. The applicant here intends to operate this property for laser tag, Nerf wars, and other tactical gaming. It operates by appointment for groups and would have limited number of people in at any given time. The applicant understands, as we have done in past situations, that they are to acknowledge within the conditional use that the adjacent users are not to be considered a nuisance to this activity so long as they are lawfully operating within the permitted or conditionally permitted uses within that district. At their February 12, 2019 meeting, the Planning Commission held a public hearing and reviewed the application, are hereby forwarding the recommendation for approval. The applicant, who is going to be the owner and operator of Tactical Action Gaming, is here as well, Mr. Lloyd Harfarth, if you have any questions. And we had no comments or questions at that public hearing. So,
thank you, Mr. Solberg.
Thank you.
Any questions? Mr. Thorstead.
All the activities can be done indoors, right? They're not going to be out running around the fields and...
Yep, all indoors.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions for the proprietor? All right, what's your pleasure, gentlemen?
Make a motion to approve.
Been moved. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Thorstead made the motion. Commissioner Jurdovic seconded. Conditional use permit for laser tag facility in light industrial zoning district at 1702 4th Avenue Northwest. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is item number 5 on the schedule, and it's a review the planned unit development amendment for parking ramp at 3050 Cheyenne Street. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. This application was received to continue the development of Cheyenne 32. You're very familiar. This is a proposed parking garage utilized to support development within the site and shared across the PUD, including the city's plaza space. It's currently shown a number of spaces and including storage for staging at the plaza space. Developer is working toward getting as many spaces as possible. However, in order to permit the structure, we needed to make sure that the PUD has this included. So, although you've seen this, very familiar, it technically wasn't in the PUD quite yet. So what we're doing tonight and what the Planning Commission reviewed at the February 12th meeting was simply an amendment to the PUD so that we can authorize the permit. Again, Planning Commission held a public hearing, reviewed the application, and are hereby forwarding the recommendation for approval. And the applicant is available and
thank you, Mr.
here as
Solberg.
well.
Questions, gentlemen?
It appears they have storage on the lower level for equipment for the plaza.
Yeah. It's
4x4 pallets and...
Yeah, the staging, Todd, and...
Like there's some piling going in. I'm not sure which building that's for, but there's some iron sticking out of the ground to the north of the existing construction.
Yep, they haven't called for any inspections yet, so...
And my understanding is the parking ramp has changed a little bit in size with the number of parking units from 400 plus to 369, 89, something like that.
Maybe let Matt and Todd speak to where they're at right now.
Just for the public record, just if we could, from the way it was originally presented, it's a little bit smaller.
Absolutely.
Or less parking space.
The original proposal for the TIF district we were going off. Proposed bid designs. We have those designs out now for bids. We have a finalized design. The final parking number is in that 369 range. They're going to try and gobble up some more spots. Originally, we thought they were going to be 404. We got a little bit of storage that we're trying to preserve for the plaza area so that we can function and provide space for that. And then depending on how they bring across the the Skyway from the north developer and where, the elevators run, we might be able to gobble up a couple more spots there as well. So it'll be in that 369 to 375-ish number when it's all said and done. I got an affirmative nod back there.
Any questions of Mr. Soper, Mr. Burning, or Mr. Marshall?
Good, Mr. President. We're going to use the numbers that they provide to help support any development as they go forward. So the more they get, the better off they're going to be for everyone else. So.
Thank you, Mr. Sober. Any other questions? What is your pleasure?
Make a motion to approve with the two recommendations.
Commissioner Simmons has moved. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Olson. Been moved and seconded to the planned PUD development amendment for the parking ramp at 3050 Cheyenne Street. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 6, the 13th Avenue Corridor Study Presentation. Mr. Sober.
Thank you, Your Honor. Actually, tonight I'm going to introduce Dan Farnsworth from Fargo Moorhead Metropolitan Council of Governments and Matt Heddle from HDR Engineering. Matt did the 13th Avenue study, which I believe you're familiar with. We've had plenty of public input opportunities. We use these studies in advance of any future federal funding needed for projects. It is a requirement that we go through this process. So they're going to present that tonight, and they did a really good job of keeping it brief and succinct at our Planning Commission meeting. I hope to do the same tonight. Thank you.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Commissioners. Dan Farnsworth with the Fargo Moorhead Metro Council of Governments, and I guess Tim pretty much introduced us, so I'll just hand it over here to HDR, who is a consultant working on this study, and we'll just provide you with a brief presentation on the 13th Avenue Corridor Study. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Matt Heddle. I work for the consulting firm that did perform the study for you guys here on 13th Avenue. I also have Whitney Schroeder. She's our traffic engineer that helped out as well. All right, so just a little bit about what we're going to talk to you about tonight. Just a brief study overview, some of our public involvement efforts that we did for the study, and then I'll turn it over to Whitney and let her talk about how we went about doing our traffic operations analysis both on the existing and future conditions of 13th Avenue, which leads us to our proposed kind of alternatives and how 13th Avenue may look in the future. So just kind of the study limits or the overview, it encompassed the whole 13th Avenue corridor within your guys' city limits from 17th Street East over to 10th Street West, as well as Cass County Road 28 between that 13th Avenue and Main Avenue West corridors. And then for the study, we really divided it into 4 unique segments. Segment 1 being that portion of Cass County 28 over through the Red River Valley Fairgrounds. Segment 2 between 10th Street West and Cheyenne Street, and then segment 3 between Cheyenne Street and Prairie Parkway, and the final segment, or segment 4, between Prairie Parkway and then that 17th Street East. Kind of the time frame of the study, we kicked it off back in the fall of 2017 with some initial public outreach events. We really had a booth out at your guys' Westfest parade and event, garnered over 200 responses to our online survey that we also had running at the same time, as well as we attended a public involvement or the Santa's Pajama Party over at the Rustad Center to garner some more public input and kind of really, we marketed it as what is the public's wish for 13th Avenue? What do you want to see moving on? Then we kind of had put the project on hold, waiting for some of the travel demand model data coming back to us from a separate entity through the COG, and then did some alternative development from that analysis last summer, and then held a public open house both online and in person back in December. Then really some of our public involvement, we wanted to take this opportunity to really educate the public on why their input during these studies are important and help guide kind of future projects. So you can see on the bottom of the screen over here is kind of a graphic we use to really show them the different times where their public involvement or input is brought to the table during the corridor study, and then why it is important and what we use it for. And then up on the top, just a list of some of those events that I touched on in the last slide. So let's talk about a little bit during our online public survey. We had over 280 survey responses throughout when we had this open. And really, I think the main thing we wanted to hit here is that over 65% of those responses, the people responded that they live in West Fargo or utilize the corridor. And then just some more, and this is also in your handout in your meeting packet, but just more than 96% of the travelers use 13th Avenue on vehicles. Then I'll let Whitney discuss some of the traffic operations.
Whitney, would you state your last name for others?
Whitney Schroeder. I'm with HDR as well. So the first step of the traffic operations analysis is to look at the existing traffic conditions. We did this by doing turning movement counts at each of the major intersections. We were also given counts from the city and the DOT as well. And with those counts, we then did a level of service evaluation of each of the intersections. As you can see on the figure, that provides the level of service ranking. What it is a ranking between A and F, and it's just a representation of how the intersections are behaving under the current traffic conditions and congestion. We identify specific approaches and intersections that had a level of service of E or F. Those are deemed as most congestion. So we would like everything to be D or better. So those particular approaches or movements are the intersections that we would really want to focus on to see if we can make any improvements. The next step was to do a safety analysis. We acquired the crash data for the corridor between the years of 2012 and 2016, and we looked at the density of where the crashes were occurring on the corridor. That helps us develop this heat map. This heat map just shows, hot spots. For example, you can see the intersection of 9th Street and 13th Street shown in red. So that one historically has a lot of crashes that occur right there, and that intersection also had the highest crash rate, which takes into account the traffic volume as well. The crash data also gives us information for crash reports, so we can look at the manner of collision. For example, for mid-block crashes, if there's a lot of rear ends or angle crashes at intersections. On this map, we can see some of the mid-block crash locations. There's a lot of rear end collisions between the intersections of 19th and 17th Street. So this is just another example of a location we really want to look at and see if there's ways that we can improve those rear end collisions by either designated turn lanes or access management. So once we have the existing traffic volumes and we looked at the crash data, the next step is to look at the projected traffic volumes for the future. So we use the travel demand model as our baseline, and then we go through a scenario development process. And through that process, we try to identify and locate specific sites that are anticipated to be major traffic generators, or even sites that may change traffic patterns from where they are historically. So if there's two examples on here, there's a new town center and then also the fairgrounds development. So with these, you would anticipate certain connections or maybe traffic being pulled from adjacent intersections as well. So with these modifications, we apply those to the travel demand model, and we're able to project 2045 traffic volumes. And then we do a reevaluation of all of the intersections to look at how they will perform under the projected volumes using the existing lane configurations and then also new lane configurations. And now Matt will walk you through the proposed alternatives based on those projections.
So some of the proposed alternatives, like I talked before, we broke it into the 4 segments. And one of the main things I'd like to point out for this study, during our 2045 traffic analysis, there was no capacity issues along this corridor. So a lot of these aren't going to be expanded corridor alternatives. They'll be more preservation or aesthetically pleasing. So for segment 1, we really looked at 3 different options. The no build, kind of just continue your standard maintenance that is already going on out there. Or if you remember, segment 1 is over by the Red River Valley Fairgrounds. If that happens to be annexed in and become part of the city and become a city street, maybe looking into converting that to a 2-lane, more urban section, as you can see kind of on the right middle of your screen, with curb and gutter and some shared use paths and greenway and lighting. As well as, depending on what kind of development would happen if that gets annexed in, the option for some access control or access management, really putting that 2-lane divided with a median in the middle to control that left left turning movement or some of that access management to your developed property. And then one of the options we looked at that was discussed early on in the study to kind of get it into the forefront of the FHWA and the DOT's mind is a potential overpass over I-94 where that kind of turns north and goes to Cass County 28 by the fairgrounds. So we really looked at that overpass connection just to see what it would look like, and we have 3 alignment options, with the one that kind of came to the top is the one that goes perpendicular to I-94 and realigns some of 13th Avenue. So we looked at option 1 as in having standard intersection, T-intersection options as well as roundabout, and then those costs are in the 2019 US dollars, 2018 US dollars, and they were just mainly to look at comparing the different options from a standpoint of how to move forward. So then segment 2, really that area from 10th Street west to Sheyenne Street, as I mentioned, there was no capacity issues with this already 2-lane divided urban segment. So we really looked at that no build, maintaining current lanes and things like that, as well as some safety improvements, which include kind of left turn lane offsets, which basically means that when you're in there, the center line of the left turns, making them offset to the positive side so that the opposing vehicles don't block your sight when you're making that left-hand turn. And this is key at unsignalized intersections where drivers will make those more dangerous left turns in front of vehicles if they can't see them. As well as some other pedestrian signings and marking updates, pedestrian crossing treatments. This segment goes right through that Elmwood Park area, and we heard from the public that making, during ball games or things like that, crossing there can be kind of a hazard. So really looking at the options of what we can do for pedestrian crossing treatments at that area, as well as making sure that all our truncated domes on our ADA ramps are located and orientated the way they're supposed to up to current standards, really improves the safety for the pedestrians. Then segment 3, between Sheyenne Street and Prairie Parkway, is currently a 5-lane segment, kind of more of a rural-looking segment in the middle of the city. So we really looked at that, the no-build or the 4-lane divided with that raised median. And as I mentioned, that really helps that access control. Some of the things we heard from the public was access to 13th Avenue or being able to get onto 13th Avenue during peak times. And by limiting some of the spacing of that access and people not making that judgment call on a left turn, shooting across 2 lanes of traffic, this is one of the options to make things a little safer for them. And as well, segment 4, as we all know, just recently got reconstructed last summer. So we really had the no build option. Everything was worked out during that design process last fall. So with that, we'll be open to any questions.
Sure. Questions?
Commissioner Thorstad.
Did you engage the 13th Avenue property owners at all? I mean, you had some different events, it sounds like, but did we send out anything to the business owners and the residents along 13th Avenue?
Yep, so before our public meeting in December, we went through and handed out or hung door knockers on everybody's house adjacent to the 13th Avenue that basically told them, hey, we're having a public involvement meeting next Thursday, come join. Or we also, after that public meeting in person was held, we held a virtual public meeting, we call it, for the 15-day comment period where they could go onto the website and review everything that we had available at the in-house public meeting.
Okay, and as far as the existing streets and stuff we got there, are they in good shape or not on any timeline or whatever where they have to be replaced? We just replaced everything kind of east of 9th Street, and it seems like the other pavement's in overall pretty good shape. It doesn't sound like you have any huge recommendations for changes within the corridor.
No, we didn't see any, and like you stated, the portion of the corridor that was really in probably more disrepair was that portion on the east end. I know Cass County 28 just recently got overlaid or reconstructed as well. In the other areas, they are seeing some deteriorating pavement, but nothing that is at the forefront of needing to be replaced.
Okay, so people don't have to get excited that we're going to start attacking 13th Avenue now here in the next couple of years.
No, and that's one of the things we tried to educate the public on during the whole process, that corridor studies are more of a long-term, 5 to 10 to 20-year, planning and budgeting process.
Thank you.
I'm curious, Mayor. I'm just curious. I mean, I totally get the part going west from probably Cheyenne Street west, but how could you even do any study when we've been 2 years under construction anywhere east? I don't get it. I guess I'm losing something here because I'm thinking, boy, you sure waste a lot of money here because we just did that. I mean, it's done. I guess I don't understand, Tim, where that's coming from. The east side. I mean, it's
so the corridor was identified as potentially needing improvement within 5 to 10 year range. When we talk about major improvements to roadways and we want to get federal funding, this is a step in the process. We have to go through this to get the federal funding.
I get that, but we've already put in a third lane, and I don't even see it on this.
Oh, to the so that portion was actually part of this, and then if you recall, we added that on because Fargo was working on their portion.
Right. So
we just sort of glazed over that. They didn't spend much resources on doing anything.
I was just curious. I'm thinking here.
No, they kind of glazed over that.
We're about a year too late on this stuff.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch what you were asking there.
Okay, Chris.
I mean, add on to that, Commissioner Simmons. I think as we went into this project, we knew that we had limited right of way and the condition of most of the road east of Sheyenne Street. We knew there weren't going to be a lot of impacts, a lot of changes to those areas. We were really more concerned about what could be happening at the fairgrounds.
Absolutely, that was where I was going with
interstate, and we even toyed with a little bit of idea for a while, continuing as farther north and jumping the diversion going north to our existing growth area up there. So
my biggest concern, Chris, is going from probably 9th Street west, because that narrow little section there we got even to the park board. I mean, we should have done that better perhaps years ago when we did it. It's just not very wide, and that was our fault.
And even just east of Cheyenne Street, we're really limited. The area's built out. Unless we take something really changes.
I mean, that's why I meant Cheyenne Street. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that.
So I mean, that areas were kind of built out. There's not going to be a lot of changes. Commissioner Thor said your idea there, your question about the pavement conditions. Since we did that overlay here about 4 or 5 years ago, it's really extended the pavement capacity in that area. It's originally built in '74, and I don't see any issues out there, certainly for the short term. So we're a good 5 years out before we have any more construction out there.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Scott.
To say a different way, after this study, we have not decided to execute anything to our 5-year CIP. So we are not planning to take anything from this study and move it into our 5-year CIP and start getting money kind of improvement. That's another way to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Scott, for that clarification. Any questions? Additional questions of Tim? Matt? Dan? Whitney?
I would ask that if I could, adopting this study is really all we need to do, right, Chris? So that way when 5 years out, when we need to start designing something, we have this on file. And COG's policy board is going to review this at their next meeting?
Mr. Sorberg is asking for an action item on this. Commissioners?
I move we approve it.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jeremy? And moved and seconded to accept the corridor study presentation, 13th Avenue corridor study presentation. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye, please. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next order of business is item number 7, illegal dumping of snow discussion. Brad Olson. Is that our Brad Olson up here?
Would be me.
All right, Commissioner, please.
I'm confessing. No, I'm not. I didn't do anything. I just want to bring it up in this public forum for Chris and maybe Assistant Chief Jerry to address it. It's been in the news. It's been on in the paper about certain fines and what not to do and things like that. So I just wanted to know what is our policy and ordinances on that.
Well, I think moving into this, I think Commissioner Olson contacted myself and Jerry and some other people about he saw some people putting a large amount of snow out in the streets after we've actually went out there and treated these things, and it makes it difficult for the traveling public and us having to come back and clean it multiple times. And he asked, what are our ordinances and how can we get these out to the public better and what can we do to move forward? Talking with Assistant Chief Boyer, Jerry, he made a comment that we haven't really had this type of snow for several years, and it's kind of not really in front of our mind. And typically what we've done in the past is that we have the ordinance out there. We get it forwarded out here if we see it as we come by afterwards, or one of my plow operators sees it going on. We were used to send the address to Freeman over here, and they would send out a letter reminding the residents of what the ordinance is and how they should be doing things. From that point, from an enforcement standpoint, it's very difficult. If the police are going to write a ticket for this, they have to be there to actually witness it occurring. And that's by the time we see it, we call somebody, police get over there, they're busy. It's difficult to witness that. The other way is we would have to swear out a complaint against the person who's doing this. So we would have to identify the person and come to the judge and file a complaint. So the enforcement is very, very difficult. I know Chief Boyers was talking about some things that they were looking for public outreach. I'll let you touch on that.
Mr. President, Commissioners, so we are looking at trying to educate the public and do that through our social media team, and also involve Melissa and Ellen, the city, and communicate that out. Hopefully, like Chris said, we had a process that we'd used in the past. It's been quite a few years since we've had to actually do anything with that. People have changed and roles have changed, so our enforcement on the police side really wasn't there in the past. We're going to take more of a role in that on the enforcement side. We're going to try to educate the public first. After that, if we have to take enforcement action, then we will do so.
And the reason I bring this up, because I saw a guy at the end of his driveway who had just gotten done shoveling a two-stall driveway all out onto Chris's nice clean streets. And it was that deep across the entire width of the street. And it's easy to tell even today where that was, even it's been a week now, because it's rough and things like that. Yeah. So it was just kind of like, well, what do we do? It sounds like it's almost impossible to enforce this ordinance that we have, because unless a police officer sees them do it, we can't do anything about it. So I don't know if there's a way to change that or not. I guess that's why I brought it up.
Yeah, I mean, like Chris was saying, any plow operator or any person that witnesses it, if they can identify the person, and they're willing to go to court to say that, yes, that's the person I saw doing it, that's what you have to have. So right. That's why it's take the residents out of the battle and have the police officers actually see it when they're driving around and patrolling at night. During the daytime, that's when we try and catch them. It doesn't happen very often, but yeah, when it does happen, you can tell. Again, we're just going to try and educate the public so that they understand that they can't be putting it back out into Chris's clean streets.
One other item on that, I live in an area where there's a lot of apartment complexes, and it's tough to keep clean when they're always parking on the street. But I've noticed that there's this one car been sitting there for 10 days now, at least 7 to 10 days, hasn't been moved, and they've had to go around them several times. And we have a 72-hour parking ordinance, do we not? I believe. So, I mean, it should be yanked out of there, and others too, wherever they're at. They're easy to spot. They're snow covered, and there's been all the plows been around them, so it just creates a hazard for everybody.
Yeah, we do have our community service officer that kind of specializes in that, and she travels around throughout the day and responds to calls for service on complaints of vehicles that have been sitting there. So she's very busy doing that. So if you want to give me the address later,
I will.
Well aware of that.
Mark's just going to run home and move his car.
Yeah, I just got to go move my car, Brad. I park it out there.
Sorry, Commissioner.
What is the penalty for, I guess, in that case, throwing the snow onto the street? What is the penalty?
That actually, I've been reaching out to the judge to have her set the bond amount on that. So we'll have to find out hopefully tomorrow. It can be up to $1,000.
Okay, so would that also cover, I don't know if we've had a problem lately, but we've had in the past complaints where commercial guys are pushing out the driveway and putting it over into the boulevard across the street, which is,
We have had a handful of those, Commissioner Thorstead. Gary, you have an idea how many they've had? But I know we've sent out some letters about pushing across the boulevard and adjacent properties. The ordinance is very succinct, saying you can place snow on the boulevard adjacent to your property. So we've had that. We've contacted some snow removal people down in more of our rural areas that still have the ditch system. They're about storing snow in the ditches, so we don't need that come spring, so we have the culverts operating. So there's a little bit of whole bit of snow housekeeping that we've been trying to get on top of.
You know, we've had this problem ever since I've been on the board, but like our Assistant Chief Boyer said, you know, this is one of those unusual years where we have an extra amount of snow. I think overall our citizens are very good and responsible at what they do. We just have a few out there that, you know, refuse to, or don't know. Maybe they're new. I think you're right. We get with Melissa and Ellen and do some communication more better. Perhaps a little video of you giving somebody a ticket would do a lot. You know, just some of that stuff. I really think we'll clean it up. I don't think we need to get into the Mounted Police or whatever, the sidewalk patrol, and run around and ticket people. I think that'll help a lot if we do that.
I agree. Maybe not with me outside.
That would be a good promo, though, Ellen, to get them giving a ticket to someone with a snow shovel.
I've heard them have some novel ideas that they're working on.
Yeah, yeah.
Ideas for a video we're working on.
There you go, see? And you know what? Those work. I mean, people watch them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Anything else for us, Brad, on that item?
Oh, that item, no.
Very good. All right, next item is number 8, is the review the application for abatement or refund of taxes for Microtel, 705 23rd Avenue East. Mr. Lee.
Thank you. Commissioners, today you're going to meet as the local Board of Equalization for an abatement hearing. Abatement hearing today is for Microtel. Microtel is a 74,250 square foot building built in 2014. You're probably all well familiar with it. There behind Costco, 88-unit hotel. We sent out a workup from the applicant and myself. They're appealing 2017 and 2018, and just for the record, I'll put the numbers here. 2017 value of $5,208,100 and 18 value of $5,161,900, and they're asking for a reduction of $3.3 million. This will be 2 separate votes for both years.
So I'm sorry, Nick, real quick, did you say now that we have to meet as a Board of Equalization?
You are meeting as a Board of Equalization for this.
I agree, but John, do we not have to get out of our commission meeting and, you know, open up that board?
When you're dealing, great question, Commissioner Simmons. When you are meeting on these abatement applications, you don't have to formally call the Board of Equalization into order. You're just meeting at it as it. You make a recommendation to the County Commission regarding whether or not the valuation should remain the same or be reduced.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Mr. Lee, would you restate the years?
2017.
There's 2 action items.
Yep. 2017. The action is they're requesting a reduction from $5,208,100 to $3.3 million, and 2018 reduction from $5,161,900 to $3.3 million.
Thank you.
And again, you guys received the workup and got a chance to look at that ahead of the meeting. The applicant said they'd make someone available, so I suggest that you let them come up here, and if you got any questions for them, go ahead, and then if you have any questions for me, then we can work from there, I guess.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Any questions for Mr. Lee? Sir. You'd state your name and your address, please.
Yes, sir. My name is Ethan Horn, and I am from Denver, Colorado, and I live at 4935 West 28th Avenue in Denver, Colorado.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner President, Commissioners, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today, and also thank you to Mr. Lee and his staff for their responsiveness and assistance in the abatement process. I'm here today as tax representative of the owner of the Microtel in West Fargo. We're here today in request of a reduced assessed value of the property. In support of our request, we have provided an appraisal. It's performed by a third-party independent appraiser, North Dakota State Certified and MAI designated appraiser. And have y'all been provided with a copy of the appraisal that we have provided? Okay, great. If I could, can I hand out one more exhibit to reference?
Yes, sir, please.
I'm so sorry, I forgot to give a copy. Great. Well, I guess to start, to give a little bit of background on the subject property. As Nick stated, this is an 88-unit hotel, Microtel, located at 705 23rd Avenue East. This was constructed over the time period of 2014 and 2015. And since the property was completed, the property has struggled. It has not been able to generate a profit since opening. And there's factors that have gone into this. Two main factors. There's an increased supply of competition around the property, as well as general market conditions that have seen a downturn since the property was constructed. To reference the properties, the additional competition that has come online since the property was completed, within just a 2-mile radius, we've had 4 other new hotels be built right around the same time that the Microtel was built. You have off 19th Avenue, the Holiday Inn Express. Off 23rd Avenue, you have the 4 Points by Sheridan. Off of 23rd Avenue South, you have the Sleep Inn. And off of 55th Avenue South, you have the My Place. So 2 miles, 4 new hotels. In addition to this, if you have the appraisal in front of you, there will be page numbers, and on page 32, I'd like to reference the revenue statistics for North Dakota hotels. On that page, there's a chart at the top of the page, and you'll see it indicates a point of January 15, and then a steep decline to January of 2017. That decline represents a 36% decline in revenue for hotels across North Dakota. So the story is around the property is that the owner and the developer would absolutely not have built that property as of the valuation dates based on the market conditions at that time. The property has not been profitable, and the cost to build, and they are not able to generate a return based on the cost of the property. Now, moving into the appraisal and the approach that the appraiser took, as you may be aware, in real estate valuation, there are 3 approaches to value that are used. That's the income approach to value, the sales comparison approach, and also the cost approach to value. Then the appraisal provided, the appraiser has relied mainly upon the income approach, a very minor emphasis on the sales comparison approach, and then although the cost approach was considered, it was not given any weight in his consideration of opinion of market value. Now, to further touch on that, I'd like to point to page 49 of the appraisal. So at the bottom of the page, and the paragraph is titled Methodology Applicable to the Subject. In valuing the subject property, only the sales comparison and income capitalization approaches are applicable and have been used. Prospective buyers of hotels generally do not base or place weight on the cost approach as a basis for determining market value. There's a limited application of this approach. The sales and income provide the basis for establishing a credible market value conclusion and is consistent with the market participants' actions in determining market value for a property similar to the subject. And then further in the document that I had just provided, if you could flip to page 5, and there's an asterisk indicating what I'm pointing to. Knowledgeable buyers of lodging facilities generally base their purchase decisions on economic factors such as forecasted net income and return on investment. Since the cost approach does not reflect any of these income-related considerations, but requires instead a number of highly subjective and unsubstantiable depreciation estimates, this approach is usually given very little weight in the hotel valuation process. Further, now I'd like to place this in contrast into the assessor's current approach. The assessor's office, as stated within the support that they provided, indicates that our valuation model is a sales-adjusted cost approach. So we have the Appraisal Institute telling us that the cost approach should be given very little weight, if any, and yet the assessor's office is relying mainly upon that. Further, the assessor's office states that their cost approach is adjusted by sales. Now I'd like to go back to page 5 of the handout that I provided. To obtain a supportable estimate of value, the sales price of a comparable property must be adjusted to reflect any dissimilarities between it and the subject property. If you refer to the assessor's workup that they provided, they provide a list of sales comps they use as support, but I see no such required adjustments. So we have the assessor's current approach relying on the cost approach, which should be given none if little any weight, and their secondary approach should be the approach that's giving minor if any weight. And the most obvious concern with this is that they have not given any weight to the approach that is most applicable, and that's the income approach to value. That's how everybody decides how to buy a property, how much income can it generate. And so now I'd like to kind of address the objections that the assessor's office has stated towards not wanting to consider a third-party independent appraisal of value. They state, and it's correct, the date of value of the appraisal is March 16th of 2018. That is beyond the valuation dates that we're looking to. But as stated within the assessor's provided support, even though the appraisal is dated after the dates of value, the data contained within is still applicable. And the data that's used to drive the opinion of value pertains to both of the assessment dates that we're speaking to. And on that point, the income approach that is being derived to determine this opinion of value is a theoretical proposition that maybe one day this property could become profitable. As of the valuation dates, it was negative cash flowing. So we know that no one would build this property at that given time. It would not generate a return on the cost required, but we of course recognize that there is still some value in the property that is tied to the potential that one day it could become profitable. So, although the property is negative cash flowing, we still recognize that there is some value in the property, and that being $3.3 million as indicated by this appraiser. I'm here on behalf of the taxpayer and the owner of the hotel, but this has impacts beyond just the viability of the hotel. The hotel supports 35 plus full-time and part-time employees, and it also generates additional tax revenues from other operations of the business. We are asking for, as our right as taxpayers, to be taxed based upon the market value of our property. And we feel that we have overcome the burden of proof to prove that our opinion of value should be in line with an MAI, North Dakota State Certified Appraiser's opinion of value. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ethan. Gentlemen? Mr. Simmons.
I have a question, sir. Just so I'm understanding this, basically what you're telling me is because the hotel's not profitable, which in my opinion has nothing to do with us. Obviously we care, but it has nothing to do with this. What you're talking about, you're saying that we should lower it for that purpose because the hotel isn't making money, then we should lower the valuation. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
No, sir. I am saying that per law, that properties are supposed to be assessed at market value. And we have direct evidence and strong evidence that the current assessment of the property is above the market value of the property.
But you're saying because you're not profitable. Did I not hear you say that many times?
Mr. Jurdovic.
Well, the question I have is, didn't the current owner buy the remaining ownership of this hotel in June of last year at a value of $5.9 million?
And I'm sure that's tied to the original cost of the property, that it was an interrelated transaction.
Right, but why would they buy out?
It's not a market transaction.
Why would they buy out their other business partner at a valuation of $5.9 million if the true value is 3.3? Like, if all these facts were there in June of 2018, which by what you've presented they were, that seems like a very poor decision, and one that, to me, I mean, a transaction just happened within less than a year. It values this at $5.9 million.
That's incorrect, actually. That's not a market value transaction. It's an inter-party related transaction, not exposed to the open market. It's not an accurate reflection of market value, and it would not be considered by any appraiser or any assessor. But I understand the point. I get it. But the partners in it, they all came out of pocket to build this thing. And so I don't know exactly why the ownership was transferred, but it's not a reflection of what the true market value of the property. If an outside investor was to come and look at this, it just has no bearing on the market value, which is the goal of what we're here today to do.
I apologize to Commissioner Simmons, you weren't finished with your question. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, because actually it falls into play. It does matter what a partner just paid. Listen here, go. It absolutely matters that he thought it was worth, in his eyes, it was worth $5.9 million. You never answered my question, because I heard you several times, you're talking about it's not making a profit, and that is part of the reason you're here, but now you just told me you're not here for that. So I just want to make that clear. It
is a factor, yes, sir.
It is a factor. Okay, then.
Mike, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Are you challenging the price per room, that calculation at all? In your overall analysis, you're talking about, the profitability and the 5.9 purchase price is a transactional decision between two business owners. But are you challenging the calculation used on a per room basis? Is that flawed data in your opinion?
Well,
because 88 units times $53,000 isn't $3.3 million.
I guess I'm not following the line of questioning. A per unit value is determined after the value, and then you divide by the number of rooms to see what it's worth on a per room basis. So it really all comes down to the number is determined based on the income capacity of the property.
Let me clarify where I'm coming from. If you take a look at some of the comps that have taken place across the state of North Dakota or the region, that's the calculation that it comes out to be. So my apologies for not clarifying that.
No, and I thank you for raising that point. Within the sales prices that the assessor's office has provided as support, I'd like to ask the question, how much of that purchase price was personal property? How much of that purchase price was the going concern of the property? We have not isolated a real estate only value, which by North Dakota standards is how real estate is assessed. It's real estate only. Within these purchase prices, there is personal property. So these numbers...
You're talking fixturing and
yes,
all of that type of thing?
Furniture,
okay.
fixtures, and equipment. Yes, sir. And so that has not been isolated from these sales prices. So we can't even rely on these sales prices.
I'm getting more confused. You see, North Dakota law says you can only go by the real estate, but yet, like Commissioner Simmons is saying, you're throwing in all the income and everything as well. And the question I got is, if they're not profitable, why are they not profitable? Is it because of the facility itself, or is it for operations? And the statistics you throw out, that's total for North Dakota. You referred to page 32. There was a big spike about 4 or 5 years ago, but that was also when we had the oil boom out west. So where's the data on the Fargo-Moorhead market? Where's the comparables to the other hotels in Fargo? Where's it placed within that comparisons on the metro markets? The metro market is different than the North Dakota market by far. And that's the comparisons I'm seeing a lot here, and you're referring to is North Dakota. Well, yeah, I take a random guess that the oil boom went down and there's a lot of motel rooms available probably on the western side of the state, and the price per average for the whole state's gone down. But how about the metro area? How about comparable properties and their rental rates, and again,
yes,
in operations?
Yes, sir.
Should we supplement or reduce the tax valuation because you're unable to turn a profit for reasons beyond anyone's control?
That is,
I think Mr. Simmons
I need to clarify. The main reason we're requesting a reduction of value is not because the property is just unprofitable. That's a factor of it, absolutely. But we're looking at this as any investor would look at a property to determine market value. That's how you determine market value.
But you're saying the people that bought the property are not an investor because they're not. I guess we'll have to disagree on that.
That's like trading a house to your brother. It's not exposed to the open market.
If I buy a business with my partner, I'm buying that asset based on what the value is. Just because they happen to be an arm's length transaction does not eliminate that person as a person that's investing in that property. I think it's a very viable thing to look at and say it was $5.9 million they bought it for. They either didn't research or didn't have those factors in, but to me that's established a price point for this property.
No, there are influences within that transaction that are not tied to market value. This is...
Such as what?
Such as they are just trying to, it has to do with the original cost of the property, and they're, it's an interrelated, it's a related party transfer. They are not going through the same process of looking at the financials and making a determination based on market value. The considerations are not to do with market value.
But it's hard to, it's hard to say that somebody would pay $5.9 million to buy something that you're now saying is only worth 3.3.
No, I guess
I think that's a tough stretch.
I guess this brings up the point that we're questioning an MAI designated state certified appraiser's opinion of value.
Okay.
And so we have an appraiser who we all rely on. These are the experts telling us the market value of the property. And that's what I'm hearing.
There's a lot of experts out there, sir, that tells us.
But you're talking about the 2017 calendar year and 2018 calendar year, and you'll have to forgive me. Sitting up here with me are a number of businessmen. You know, in my career, I bought 9 businesses over my career, and the market value is what they could sell it for or what I could buy it for. And if in 2018, am I correct on that date? A transaction for...
It was June of 2018?
June of 2018, a transaction for $5 million. To me, as a business person, that kind of is a comp right there, and that in fact is the value, the market value determined by investing professionals that are in the hotel business. And so with all due respect, Ethan, we love the fact that there's 35 employees that are, working at this facility. We love the fact that it's located within the city of West Fargo, but to me, market value is what you could buy it or sell it for. And I bought businesses both on the high side and on the low side. So that was the comp for, and again, you're correct. When you take a look at buying a business or figuring out what the assessed value is, certainly you look at income. And certainly you look at the property and you look at the, the facility and all the fixturing. So with all due respect, I'm a little confused on how, so how did you arrive at $3.3 million? If you could, in detail.
Yes, the appraisers determined the value of $3.3 million.
All right, enough said on that. All right.
I would love to go through the income approach. They take into account comparable properties within the Fargo market to determine all of their assumptions. This is a 170-page report by an expert to determine his opinion of market value. And it's not for property tax purposes. This is completely unrelated. This is a true independent opinion of market value by an expert.
Market value based on the performance of the facility and the income.
Yes, while also considering the sales comparison approach and the cost approach. That's all contained within here.
Well, you can't, I'm sorry, Mayor, you can't be considering the sales comparison because it was sold again. Whether you think it was a private inside buddy, it still went for over $5 million, $5.9 million. That was a credible transaction. That's what that investor felt it was worth.
With all due respect, it's not a credible transaction.
Okay, I'm done asking questions.
Okay. It must be exposed to the open market and it's not an arm's length transaction.
No more questions, Mayor.
Mr. Lee, could you please refresh my memory? I don't have it pulled up right now. On the Microtel sale in Minot, I'm very familiar with that. I was asked to be an investor in that. I didn't do it, but, spent numerous trips up there to look at the property. So would you remind me of what that property sold for? Comparable in land mass, I would certainly believe.
Right. Yep. Actually, the land value up there is a little less, but the per room, because I like to break it out, per room was $53,096. Again, that's unadjusted, and yes, you bring out a valid point. That's what we do. We on appeals, we bring out an unadjusted array for you to, just kind of decide for yourself. Here's the top end, here's the low end. Where do you think it falls in there? We've done all of our work with our cost or a sales adjusted cost approach. I mean, that's how you value an entire town every year. You can't do a fee appraisal for each one. And I don't think, when you get down to it, an appraiser and a fee appraiser, or a state certified appraiser like myself versus a fee appraiser, we're going to probably come out to a different value for tax purposes. We do consider the income approach. We also don't get any information from 90% of people until they're appealing on income approach. We do our best with statistical data that we get from national magazines and things, and we do consider that. But every property is valued using the same model, and that's our uniformity and consistency, which is number one in this business. And then when we have an appeal, we provide an array so that you guys can see if it fits in that array, and if it does, then we're good to go.
Any additional questions, Mr. Lee?
So I need a motion to approve or deny for both years, just as a reminder.
Certainly, sir. Please step to the microphone.
Nick makes a great point. There are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of parcels to be reviewed by the assessor's office. They don't have the time to run a fee appraisal on every single property. They just don't. And that's why this process that we have here in the abatement application process exists. If we see a clear overtaxation, overestimation of market value, then this process exists exactly for that, for us to provide an expert's opinion of market value to come to the right determination with the assessor's office. This is an opportunity for all of us to work together. We're doing our job of providing the evidence as to why we're being overtaxed. What does this exist for, if not for this right now? Providing an expert's testimony. I feel like this is very critical to the taxpayers' rights to be able to have their testimony heard and taken into serious consideration when you have an appraisal expert providing opinion of value. We recognize the shortfallings, not shortfallings, it's a part of the process, but the assessor's office does not have the opportunity to look at this in depth that the appraiser does, and we're providing that information and using this process to do so. So I ask that we keep that in consideration, that this process is put into place for a purpose.
Yes, sir, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely could not agree more. Mr. Lee, would you step back to the microphone, please? So, the gentleman had referenced a number of new facilities that have been built within our community and within a certain distance. Can you tell me whether or not any of the West Fargo properties have appealed theirs in the city of West Fargo, their assessment values?
Through the abatement process?
Yes, sir.
No, none have.
None. Were there any none in 2018? Were there any in hotels only in 2017 or 16?
No.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, we have two questions on the table, as Mr. Lee has pointed out to us. A decision on a 2017 reduction of a $5.2 million assessment to 3.3, and in 2018 a 5.165 assessment versus 3.3. So we'll deal with the 2017 first. I'll rely on our legal counsel, Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. President, and members of the Commission. I just wanted to, as a point of clarification with these requests for abatement, if you grant them, they get a check that's returned to them from tax dollars that have been previously paid. I also wanted to call attention to having had some experience with cross-examining appraisals, some of their old sales that they've relied upon are spread across the country, and the age of the structures, some of them were built in 1995 and 93 and 2004 and 2007. So I don't necessarily know if their appraiser used appropriate sales comparison, and it's always hard to verify whether the income approach is proper or not without having a full cross-examination and getting into the hotel's actual revenue and sales production, which I don't know if that's necessarily relevant when you have a sale on the property that just occurred recently. But it's up to you how you want to handle it, and the process. You make a recommendation to the county commission. The county commission makes the actual decision. You make a recommendation only. If the taxpayer is not satisfied with the decision of the county commission, they can appeal their decision to a district court. The standard of review at the district court is a very high deference given to political subdivisions. And in this case, the taxpayer didn't state any legal grounds. It was all based upon valuation, which is different. There's two elements to these suits. There's a purely legal case, like it shouldn't have been assessed, it's ag property, versus a valuation issue, and this is only valuation. So,
thank you, Mr. Shockley. Commissioners, what is your pleasure?
Just one last question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Thorstad.
The comparables, there's only one hotel that's listed in the Fargo-Moorhead Metro as a sale within the last few years. That apparently this Microtel never sold. That was something else. But so we only had one sale transaction with all the motels we've had within town here within the last few years. There's only one comparison. That's the Days Inn and Suites in Fargo. Other than that, they're from, like, say, Jamestown, Minneapolis, Hutchinson, Georgia.
If I could, I'd like to speak to that.
Sure.
Page Page 96, as I stated before, the income approach is the approach that's given the strongest emphasis and mainly relied upon. In valuing the subject, the income capitalization approach is considered most reliable and has been given primary emphasis, with secondary emphasis placed on the other approaches. Based on the foregoing, the market value of the subject has been concluded as followed, and that is based upon the income approach to value. So the concern with the sales comparison approach is a moot point. Thank you.
So the results on page 51 are actual sales results, so?
They are, and it's considered.
And there's one motel that's sold in the Fargo-Moorhead Metro.
Considered but not relied upon for his opinion of value.
One sale in Fargo-Moorhead Metro area over the last, as they go all the way back in 2015. So there's only been one transaction in the Fargo-Moorhead Metro area.
Right, and to that point, if you look at the sales that the assessor's office has provided, if you look at the dates of those sales, most of those are beyond the date of valuation. And so, if you want to question the appraiser's approach and how he determines what a comparable property is, that's fine. But that is not what he relied upon on his opinion of value. It's the income approach to value, which is the most applicable and most appropriate. And to question the sales is not to question the validity of the appraisal as a whole.
Mayor, I would make a motion that we decline to start with the 2017 tax abatement. Do we make the recommendation to the county?
Seconded by Commissioner Thorstad. Moved and seconded by Commissioner Simmons. Made the motion. Commissioner Thorstad seconded. It's been moved and seconded to not to do any type of tax adjustment on 2017 for the Microtel located at 705 23rd Avenue East in West Fargo. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Motion opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
I would make the recommendation again, Mayor, that we decline the tax abatement for the year 2018 on the Microtel Hotel.
May I speak to 2018?
Pardon?
May I make another statement?
No, sir. Is there a second? Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Sir, I will allow you to speak at this time.
Just to clarify, in order for a taxpayer to receive an adjustment to their property, what sort of evidence would be required by this board?
In my opinion?
Yes, sir.
More comps from the region. You know, if you're going to tell us that your valuation is dropped to over $2 million, you have a new facility in one of the hottest building areas in all of North Dakota. I would say that it would have to be a direct comparison on what the comps are.
And if there's not any comps?
Well, then that means
then you know, if you've got an 88 unit motel, which you do, that you're representing, what is an 88 unit hotel costing that's of a like fixturing and build? And if it's $3.3 million, then I think you have good evidence and you have a good point with our discussions.
So the cost approach would be the most important?
I'm not saying it's the most important. You were the one that was saying, you know, that the income is the most important.
That's the Appraisal Institute.
Yes.
Saying
but
that the cost
when our assessors are going by here, again, Michael's owned numerous businesses, Eric's owned numerous businesses, so have I. If you had a third-party consultant that come in and talk to me and wanted to know what my revenue was from any of my 9 businesses, do you really think that I'm going to tell him what it is? No, sir. But if they look at the property, they look at the real estate, they look at the fixturing inside the building, then I would rely on that as being an accurate assessment of what value is. Because unless you're a serious buyer with a checkbook in your hand, you're not going to get my financial information. So, with all due respect, you wouldn't have given it to this gentleman until after the protest started. Well, how could he possibly have known that?
That's what this process is here for us to disclose
yes,
the financial
sir.
statements and
we
come to a reasonable conclusion. And that's what we're doing. It's an open book. And it just seems as if there's no way for us to clear this hurdle.
In 2018, there was a $5 million transaction, and you're telling us the property isn't worth that. With all due respect,
I'm telling you, if you were to do your due diligence on the property at that time, you would not have paid $5.9 million for the property.
I've never owned a hotel. I've owned lots of apartment buildings, but not a hotel.
But it's the owner's choice to share the details of that transaction. I mean, there's obviously a purchase agreement, and if there was a certain dollar value assigned for the, you know, if he paid $2 million for the beds, and the property is different, then, I mean, that's a transaction that is known.
There's a different value between the original investors and developers than somebody coming in from outside determining how much money can this property generate for me. That's what it's all about. That purchase price has no weight. And it seems that this process here does not provide the taxpayer any sort of realistic expectation that they can have their concerns heard. We have an appraisal from an expert.
Sir, you just don't like our answers, that's all. So please sit down and let us continue on.
Well, we have a motion on the table.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Been moved and seconded that on the item of 2018 on a refund or an abatement of the taxes for Microtel at 705 23rd Avenue East, that we do not. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Item number 9, City Administrator's Report. Mrs. Fisk.
Good evening, President and Commissioners. I'll make this really quick because we still have our executive session. I just want to remind you that there's an Economic Outlook Forum on Wednesday from 12 to 1:30 at the Delta. And if you're interested in going and haven't already, let Courtney know tonight, and then she'll get you all signed up for it. And other than that, things at City Hall are going well. I'll be out of the office next week, but I will be able to be reached by phone and by email. Any questions for me?
Questions for Mrs. Fisk?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Item number 10 is the closed executive session. But before we lose the crowd, I would like to make 2 announcements, if you will. All right with you guys? First of all, 2 weeks ago, Chief Yonke Deputy Chief Boyer and the department and city staff participated in a wonderful event of a new dedication for the Chief's conference room in honor of former Chief of Police Arlen Rasmussen, who served our community for 19 and a half years as Chief. Deputy Chief Boyer, my congratulations to you and your department, to all of the city staff that participated and helped organize that. It was a wonderful event. Kudos. Excellent, excellent. A number of the commissioners were all there. It was truly a great event. And I am saddened to tell you tonight that I lost the Pinewood Derby Mayor's Challenge on Saturday. And Mahoney was about 250 miles away, and he still beat me by a hair. Mayor Mahoney was on medical call, or surgical call, which I asked the whole crowd to pray for all of his patients. His mind was probably at the Pinewood Derby contest. It was a photo finish, and it got beat by probably a 1/100th of a second, but darn it, he beat me. Dilworth come in a distant third, and Moorhead, I don't know if they were high-centered going down the rail or what, but we beat Jonathan Judd real badly. So that was one consolation. So there are only two mayors there, myself and Mayor Judd. But Fargo placed first, West Fargo at a close second, Dilworth a distant third, and Moorhead, they brought up the trail. So my apologies for a little lightheartedness there, but at this time we're going to, I'm sorry, Mr. God.
I have one
Mr. Olson.
On-agenda item.
My apologies.
I had emailed Tina and others this morning about the certificate of occupancies we're issuing to businesses and residents and all that. And I think we need to get a study going or a subcommittee or something like that to get a handle on this, because I went into a recent business, I'm not going to name them, but the construction was still going on and they were open for business. And I think we need to get a handle on that. So I'm just urging staff to start working on things like that.
Commissioner Olson, thank you for bringing that up. I should have had that in my notes. I met with Jay Sandvik today, and I also met with Mark Wilk, the inspector, that a question on the facility that you're talking about, and we'll have additional conversations with Mr. Shockley too as to how we deal with that going forward. West Fargo has a wonderful reputation of being really good folks at City Hall to work with, and we want to maintain that relationship and that reputation forever and ever. But there are expectations that we should expect when it comes to health and safety within our community, and we're going to rely on our department heads to guide us with that. But at the same time, we are going to we're going to ask Mr. Shockley for some guidance on that too. So all of the appropriate department heads will have a key role in that discussion.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. At this time, we're going to close the regular agenda. Closed. Back to the regular agenda. Item number 11 is correspondence. Yeah, do you have any questions?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Any non-agenda items are good in order. Staff? Anything for us? Seeing none. Like you back, Mark. Make a motion to adjourn. Second.